child, I had been struck by the image of RFK breaking bread at Mass with Cesar Chavez on the day Chavez ended his hunger strike. That what he had done, what I'm seeing him do in that photograph, was in accordance with Christ's admonition that whatsoever you do to the least of our brothers, that you do unto Christ himself, was clear to me even as a little boy. And I have kept the eternal and essential ripple of hope quotation from his 1966 South Africa speech on my desk at both shows for over a decade now. And whenever I feel most hopeless for our country, or for our species for that matter, I will, if I remember, read those words and take strength from its simple truth that while few can change history, everyone has the opportunity and the obligation to push back on the temptation to despair. Because despair is very seductive, like all mortal sins. And if there's any value to doing a late-night show beyond the obvious virtues of selling cold medicine and car insurance, it is acting as a nightly counterpoint to the daily diet of fear that we are all fed. Fear is one thing our country still manufactures, but you cannot laugh and be afraid at the same time. So we do our best to keep it light, in light of the darkness. And if that sends anyone even a ripple of hope, it is far beyond our ambition, but it is a compliment too great to measure. So on behalf of the hundreds of people who make what I do possible every night, and with a dangerous amount of pride, I accept this great honor. Thank you so much.
Stand up. All right, and we are off. I thought that would be a nice way to start today's show, given the tragedies that unfolded over the weekend. That was Stephen Colbert this past weekend accepting the Ripple of Hope Award at the Robert and Ethel Kennedy Human Rights Center. And I just thought that would set the tone, because that's what I want to do. Thank you for pressing play, for coming here. I'm sure a lot of people are probably skipping this episode or the show today or news in general, because it's been so horrific. On Friday night, the shooting in Providence at Brown University, where apparently the suspect that they detained has been released. So another fuck up by the FBI, apparently. That's not going to bode well. And it means the killer might still be on the loose. Then, of course, we woke up on Sunday morning to the horrific tragedy in just outside Sydney in Bondi Beach, where I've been, where Dr. Barry Hummel and his wife Darby were at not too long ago. I'm sure other listeners have been there. A horrible massacre of Jewish people and others on the first day of Hanukkah, and it was apparently a terrorist attack. They were targeted, and it's a goddamn nightmare to witness. Talked to my friend down in Australia. They are shocked and shaken, as you can imagine. They're not used to this kind of violence, and to see it unfold in their country has been heartbreaking and shocking, obviously. And then, of course, on Sunday night, and in case you didn't hear about it, if I'm the first to tell you, I'm sorry, the tragic and grisly death of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, allegedly killed by their son in their home and in a knife attack. And so everybody is now remembering the great Rob Reiner, including myself. I interviewed him a couple times. He was a staunch advocate for democracy, for progressive rights, for gay rights, for so many important issues. And he was also a monster talent who had done so much in his career. And so to see this, it's a lot. That all of those things, not to mention whatever is going on in your life this time of year, the end of the year, it is a lot. And so I think we've got to go to Fred Rogers in times like this.
You know, my mother used to say a long time ago, whenever there would be any really catastrophe that was in the movies or on the air, she would say, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers, you know, even just on the sidelines. That's why I think that if news programs could make a conscious effort of showing rescue teams, of showing medical people, anybody who is coming into a place where there's a tragedy to be sure that they include that. Because if you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope.
Yeah. And, of course, the guy who tackled the shooter in Sydney was a helper. Any of the first responders, I think all of the people that you don't see, those who work in and around folks who've gone through trauma, the psychologists and therapists and social workers, and the just folks who show up, who drop off flowers, who reach out, who do all of the things which so many of you who are listening to this show are the helpers for one another. I encourage you to reach out to each other in this community, on the Discord platform, or anywhere else in your life, and look to help. Look to do something that is a mitzvah, if you will, and that alone can be something that changes your day, that changes somebody else's day for the better. And so many of you have done that for me, and I like to think I've hopefully done that for many of you. So if you are struggling this morning, and if you are trying to wrap your head around all of this tragedy and violence, you are not alone. And let's look to each other. Let's look for the helpers and be the helpers and be the change that you want to see in the world. There are so many more good people doing good, amazing, loving, kind things in this very moment than there are bad people doing terrible things. That is what I believe. That is what gets me through the day and life, along with a healthy practice of meditation, journaling, reading, getting outside, even in the cold. I hope you get outside. All right. Well, that is my hopefully positive, thoughtful opening of today's show, because I do have to get to the headlines and so on. I've got the great Barry Ritholtz joining me. If you want to jump to it after the news, headlines, and clips, it begins at about 34 minutes into today's show. But let's get to the headlines that I've gathered for you today, and we'll get to the clips. Time for the shit show.
It's Pete's Headlines and Clip Show. Get in on the shit show.
And remember, folks, I cannot do this daily show without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic is the place to go to support my work and this show and this community so we can keep it going and growing. As I mentioned, now it looks like the count is up to 15 people killed in a shooting in Australia's famous Bondi Beach. 40 people were taken to the hospital. Officials declared the shooting a terrorist event, said the attack was designed to target Jewish people. An event to mark the first day of Hanukkah, and that's right, Happy Hanukkah. Sorry I did not say that at the beginning. This is taking place at the beach on Sunday. It was on the beach. The victims killed in the attack were ages 10 to 17 years old. A Holocaust survivor and a rabbi who organized the event were among them. And now I just want to take the opportunity to say that we all need to fight anti-Semitism wherever we see it. There's a massive spike in anti-Semitism around the world, and I think it's super important that we stand up to it wherever we see it, no matter what. It can be uncomfortable, it can be awkward, but you can't look the other way, I hope, and I hope that you can find it in your heart and also reach out to people who are affected by these tragedies. You know, I mean, when a targeted community, when this happens, communities targeted, I think it's important to reach out to folks that you know in your life that are members of that community and let you know that you're thinking of them. And anti-Semitism is as bad as I've seen it in my lifetime around the world, and we have to be violence interrupters. We have to end the cycle of hatred, and that's not easy to do in this climate. And yes, you can criticize Israel and separate Jewish people from Israel. The idea that is difficult for folks is frustrating to me. There are lots and lots of Jewish Americans and Jewish people around the world and in Israel who decry their government's decisions. And there are lots of Americans who are critical of our government's decisions, and that's an important thing to do. It's part of being a citizen, and I understand that some people are having a hard time with that, but there's no excuse at all. No, the apathy abounds, and anti-Semitism is so easy, I think, unfortunately, for too many people to fall into, and I desperately urge and encourage anybody that might be feeling that way or know somebody who is to talk themselves out of it, to do the right thing, to read about history, to be open-minded, to understand the Jewish people are the most amazing people. So many in my life that I am so close with, and I love so much the idea that people are conflating the Israeli government and their decisions and somehow allowing anti-Semitism to seep in is just something that must be stopped before its insidious viral seeds ever get planted. All right, now let's go to what happened at Brown University. Apparently, a gunman killed 2 people, injured 9 others at the engineering physics building there in Providence, Rhode Island. A man was detained as a person of interest in the shooting, and now apparently he's being released. It's really very confusing what is happening there, and we'll let it shake out, and I'm not going to react or speculate about motives there. Just another horrific shooting. Got some quotes coming up from Senator Chris Murphy, who has been the leader in the United States Senate and arguably in Congress, to explain and to do everything he can to end gun violence in this country. That's coming up. All right, 3 Americans were killed by an ISIS gunman in Syria. The shooter ambushed the U.S. and Syrian troops, killing 2 American soldiers and 1 civilian American who was serving as an interpreter. He's believed to be an Islamic State infiltrator, the gunman, working as part of a local security force. The shooting happened during a mission by U.S. and Syrian forces in a historic central town near Palmyra on Saturday. The president and U.S. military officials attributed the attack to ISIS. 2 members of Syria's security force were wounded. And so it's another tragic story and another terrible, but this violence in Syria continues even with new leadership. Obviously, ISIS is not gone, and we have not defeated them entirely. The Transportation Security Administration, TSA, is providing Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, the names of all travelers passing through American airports. TSA has submitted lists of names to the immigration agency multiple times a week since the program began in March. Multiple news outlets are now reporting this, including the New York Times. ICE then checks travelers' information against its own internal list of those subject to deportations. Though the number of those deported due to this program is unknown, documents obtained by the New York Times show that at least 2 high-profile arrests were carried out based on TSA's information. So now entering the United States is an ICE checkpoint, it would seem. And in addition, if you're flying abroad, get ready for a biometric corridor. New facial recognition tools are being tested at Orlando's International Airport and could soon be keeping track of travelers at departure gates across the country. This swift identity confirmation process powered by facial recognition could someday be coming to airports across America. Travelers will see it first in Orlando and select international departures next month. Passengers leaving the United States from Orlando first could encounter one of the 3 90-day pilot programs, including a, quote, contactless corridor, a subtly defined zone with several mounted cameras that can simultaneously process several people in motion. Scary, scary. Don't like it. Don't like that at all. Don't fly out of Orlando. And you should know that that's happening in other airports as well. At the UN, the Trump administration sided with officials from Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran, who are 3 people who you don't want to side with, 3 countries, governments who you don't want to side with, in a successful attempt to block what? A United Nations report about the dire state of the planet because it called for phasing out fossil fuels, switching to clean energy, and reducing plastics. So the U.S. is aligned with Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran against environmental protections, and that is unsurprising and very upsetting and should be noted. Let's see the latest on the Epstein files. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released a tranche of new images from the Jeffrey Epstein estate Friday that included photographs of former President Bill Clinton, media impresario Steve Bannon, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, and most notably, our founding father himself, Donald J. Trump. Who the hell? What am I reading from? Media impresario Steve Bannon. How about Christian white nationalist Steve Bannon? All right, what else can I mention? Among the White House's many setbacks last week, the board of the Federal Reserve System said on Thursday that it had reappointed all original Fed bank presidents just days after the administration began suggesting it wanted to make major changes to the reappointment process. So that's good. Elon Musk isn't having a great year. That's good, too. Tesla's U.S. sales dropped to a near 4-year low in November, despite the automaker's rollout of new, cheaper versions of its best-selling electric vehicles. So I think that is a good news. Exclusive reporting from Reuters saying not a good year for Tesla. And just want to go back to that tragic shooting in Australia to mention, as many are already, that as a result of the shooting, Australia is immediately planning tougher gun laws. Apparently, by the way, the shooters had pledged allegiance to ISIS, and there were ISIS flags reportedly in their car. But the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, says immediately that he will push for tougher gun laws after the attack. And for anybody who is going to make the point that Australia has tough gun laws and look, they couldn't prevent the shooting. These are the dumbest people that make these points. Okay, like every day people die in automobiles and they have all kinds of safety precautions that bring down the deaths. Every day people die in all kinds of tragic ways, and then different industries do different things and government does different things to prevent those deaths. In the case of gun violence in America, we do things at the state level that make a huge difference, but you have to understand, obviously, there are 300 million guns in America. There are over 400 of what's qualified as mass shootings a year. There are violent deaths, gun violence every day across the country, in this country, many of which are suicides. And so if Australia has one of these types of shooting every 20 years, I think it's fair to say that their culture and their gun laws are a lot better and different. So I think it's a preposterously stupid, ignorant statement or argument for anyone to make, whether it's in a state or community with more regulations and controls or a country. It works. It absolutely, obviously works. Okay. Well, those are the headlines that I've got for you. Let's get to the clips that I've got for you, starting with Chris Murphy, who was talking about this on CNN's State of the Union. Dana Bash tried to push him to say it's got to be more than the guns, and I just thought this answer was really, really effective here. Here it is.
We haven't had the wherewithal to do anything in Washington we did a little bit a few years ago, but of means for years and years and years. But having said that, Rhode Island has some pretty strict gun laws. They have universal background checks, red flag laws, waiting periods to purchase a gun. So this is about, and we've talked about this, much more than gun violence. It is gun violence, but the laws could be stronger, but they're stronger than other places in Rhode Island.
Well, but the laws do make a difference. I mean, if you look at states like Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, California that have stronger laws, we have gun violence rates, murder rates, mass shooting rates that are 2 to 3 to 4 times lower than states that have loose gun laws. And many of the weapons that are used in our states for gun crimes come to our states from those states that have an ability for criminals and people with serious mental illness to buy weapons. So what we know is that stronger laws do work. And since we passed that bill in 2022, the first bill in 30 years that strengthens the nation's gun laws, gun violence rates and mass shooting rates have come down in this country. But this is not shocking because over the last year, President Trump has been engaged in a dizzying campaign to increase violence in this country. He is restoring gun rights to felons and people who have lost their ability to buy guns. He eliminated the White House Office of Gun Violence Protection, and he has stopped funding mental health grants and community anti-gun violence grants that Republicans and Democrats supported in that 2022 bill. So he has been engaged in a pretty deliberate campaign to try to make violence more likely in this country. And I think you're unfortunately going to see the results of that on the streets of America.
That's a pretty big statement. He's in a campaign to make violence more likely?
Of course. I mean, he's knowingly restoring gun rights to dangerous people. He is cutting off grants that have bipartisan support to try to interrupt violence in our cities or to try to get necessary mental health resources to families and children in need. The evidence tells you that when you stop funding mental health, when you stop funding community anti-gun violence programs, when you give gun rights back to dangerous people, you are going to have an increase in violence that is knowable and that is foreseeable.
Yeah. And also when your rhetoric is threatening every single day and you're putting targets on people's backs, that's going to make even more violence. So that's a great, great point. Denabash sounded incredulous when Chris Murphy said he's making it more likely there will be violence. Of course he is. And then he makes a very sound case to back that up. Here's Senator Raphael Warnock. He was on Meet the Press on NBC with Kirsten Welker.
It is good to have you. It is a somber morning, Senator. I do want to start right there with that mass shooting on Brown University claimed the life of 2 students. Senator, what is your message to the Brown University community, the broader community this morning?
It is a somber morning indeed. And as I make my way to my own pulpit this morning, I'm going to say a special prayer for Brown University and for our nation. And I can tell you that as a pastor who has presided over many funerals, I don't think that there's any pain deeper than when nature is violently reversed. And rather than children burying their parents, the parent has to bury the child. And so we pray prayers for these families. But we have to pray not only with our lips, but with our action. Any nation that tolerates this kind of violence year after year, decade after decade, in random places on our college and school campuses without doing all that we can to stop it is broken and in need of moral repair.
Yes, in need of moral repair. We are definitely broken in need of moral repair. And let's go to my friend Laura Coates. She had Gabby Giffords on her show Friday night.
After all that you have been through, some people would give in, give up, or not fight as hard as you have fought on the policy level. Why do you keep fighting to change the laws? Why do you not want to just be in the private life?
I want to make the world a better place. I want to make the world a better place.
There you go. Gabby Giffords, thank you for that. Good stuff. All right, let's go to our Queen Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, now running for Texas, or rather for U.S. Senate from Texas. And she was at an oversight committee, House Oversight Committee the other day. She brought a picture of Kristi Noem up behind her as she made these comments, which I thought were very important. Here she is.
Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts.
Yeah, very important. Let's look into it. And here's more from Jasmine Crockett. Here she is at a Baptist church. I think her dad was a Baptist minister. Talking to black folks, and this is really good and important as always.
So I had to go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hands. You're not. We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
I know that's right.
You heard him, didn't you? You heard him. I know that's right. That's so good. That was great. All right. Well, her opponent in the U.S. Senate race is her former fellow state congressman, James Tallarico. He was on that YouTube show called Jubilee, where you have a whole bunch of people in a circle and they argue with you. Anyway, I don't know that it matters, the show, but it's pretty good. James Tallarico handles some really interesting arguments and I think very eloquent ways that are worth repeating for the rest of us. Here is this old trope from a guy saying he's never heard a Democratic argument against this, and Tallarico gives it to him.
Heard a good Democratic argument of, great, let's help people, but how are you? There are nasty people. There are There are welfare queens. There are nasty people who take advantage of the system and take away from those who earned it, take away from those who need it. So how are you going to take that into account? How are you going to make sure we cover that risk as well?
The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal taxes. The biggest welfare queens are the CEOs who get a tax deduction for flying on a private jet. It's not hungry kids. It's not working parents who work multiple jobs to provide for their families. I agree with you that we need individual responsibility, and I don't want to create a culture of dependency. I want a hand up and not a handout. You know, I believe that you don't give a man to fish, you teach a man to fish. But if you're going to take your friend out on a boat for the day to teach him how to fish, you want to make sure he had breakfast that morning. You want to make sure he's not sick, because that allows him to learn how to fish. Again, I was a public school teacher, so I saw how when kids showed up hungry, they couldn't learn that day. Even my brightest students, even my hardest working students, couldn't succeed, couldn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they didn't have boots. That's what I'm trying to fix in this country. We don't want dependency. We want to reward hard work. And I think that should apply to those billionaires, not just working people.
Yes, indeed. That's the argument always when people talk about welfare. Tell them about corporate welfare and try to do as good as Tellerico did there. Okay, now let's go to Congressman Ted Lieu, who had this funny little bit that he's doing at a Democratic House press conference the other day. Because Jabba the Pizza Hut is so unpopular, he's really encouraging him to get out there and advocate for Republicans.
Strongly support President Trump going on the road. Even though he is old and weak and has trouble staying awake at cabinet meetings, I am begging the White House to please send Donald Trump to every swing House district. Many people say that Congressman David Valadao in California would love to have Donald Trump visit. Donald Trump can talk about how tariffs are helping the farmers. He could talk about how the racial profiling by ICE is helping Valadao's constituents. And he could talk about how the Medicaid cuts are owning the libs in David Valadao's district. I would love for Donald Trump to go to every House swing district.
Yes, I like that. All right, here's Professor Timothy Snyder, the author of On Tyranny, expert on authoritarianism. He was talking to, I think, reporter Jessica Yellen. Thought this was worth sharing.
It's okay to call detention centers concentration camps. It's okay to use words like the one that you just used, disappeared. It's okay to use words that invoke other things which can help us see the larger structure of what's going on in the U.S. It's okay to be shocked by this. One has to see the outrageousness of it and describe the outrageousness of it, and one has to do the little things one can to make it seem not normal, even if you can't stop it, to make it seem not normal.
All right. There you go. Permission granted. Thank you, Professor Snyder. And now let's go to Senator Rand Paul continues to make the case against war in Latin America.
I mean, the president also said, well, be careful, Colombia, you could be next. I mean, if we're going to go and topple regime after regime in South America, there's no amount of money that can be printed to pay for that. And I don't think that the lives should be lost without a vote by Congress and the people approving of this. That's what our Constitution intended.
All right. Well, I think we deserve some laughs, some comedy brought to you by the Weekend Update Boys. This weekend, Saturday Night Live was live. So here's about 4 minutes of jokes. Some of them require images, but I'm not supposed to explain what those images are, I don't think. People are on different sides of it. You let me know if it's worth listening to without some of the punchline images.
President Trump led a rally celebrating his handling of the economy, which for some reason he held at a casino in the Poconos. Just kind of weird to say, the future is brighter than ever. Isn't that right, woman on oxygen playing the nickel slots? Trump's speech was supposed to focus on the affordability crisis, but he drifted off topic just a little bit.
They don't use the word chief of staff anymore because of the Indians. Can you imagine if Donald Trump married his sister? Do we love minors? I love minors. What? Don't forget who? Eggs.
I love that the president lost his train of thought and someone in the crowd had to remind him his train of thought was eggs. Sorry, eggs! As you can see from the sign behind him, the theme of the rally was lower prices, bigger paychecks, which was much better than his original economic message, not my fault, sell your blood.
This week, President Trump claimed that affordability is a new word made up by Democrats to hurt him. But if Democrats really wanted to make up a word specifically to hurt Trump, it would probably be fatmentia. President Trump also complained about immigrants from countries like Haiti and asked, why can't we have some people from Norway instead? Or how about someone who's Norwegian and Haitian, like Times Square Elsa?
The Department of Homeland Security posted an image of immigration officers in Santa hats with the caption, "You're going ho, ho, home." Even worse, Santa retweeted it. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem testified before Congress where protesters interrupted her by shouting the line, "The power of Christ compels you," from The Exorcist. Noem mostly ignored them, but did take one quick look back.
Last week, President Trump hosted multiple events at the Kennedy Center, including an award ceremony for Sylvester Stallone, Gloria Gaynor, and rock band Kiss, as well as a musical performance by the Village People, which raises the question, is Donald Trump a gay man from 1978?
In a new interview, President Trump said that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's days are numbered, as opposed to Trump, whose days are lettered. Trump also said that the proposed merger between Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery could be a problem, adding, bribe. In response, Netflix is offering Trump one night with the Demon Hunters.
The Archdiocese of New York announced that it will set up a $300 million fund for victims of sex abuse. The church encourages victims to claim the money by sticking their hand in this here hole.
Okay. Health officials are reporting a surge in winter vomiting disease, which is better known as SantaCon.
And an image of a drunk Santa throwing up. Okay, there you go. Those are the jokes, the comedy here, clip at the end. And I hope that you liked the opening segment. If you listened to all of it, I am grateful. I put a lot into it, a lot of thought into it, and a lot of work into it. And I can't do it without you. So patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Second plug. Also, we will be together in Vegas if you want to come April 9th through 12th. It's Pod Jam 3 featuring J.L. Covan and Rod and Karen from the Black Guy Who Tips podcast. They're going to join me this week. We're going to tape, I think, on Wednesday of this week. Finally going to get together with Rod and Karen. Very much looking forward to that. You can watch my interview with Barry Ritholtz that I'm about to air. You can watch it on YouTube or Substack because we sat down on Friday morning. YouTube at Stand Up with Pete, same for Substack. And what can I say about our friend Barry? You know him. He's a regular here. His latest book is How Not to Invest, the Ideas, Numbers, and Behaviors That Destroy Wealth and How to Avoid Them. You should get that book as a way to support Barry. And he needs all the support he can get, let's be honest. Bailout Nation is his first book, How Greed and Easy Money Corrupted Wall Street and Shook the World Economy. As well as Ritholtz.com, you can read his daily blog, The Big Picture. Of course, he's the founder of the firm, and I love talking to Barry. Always love our conversations, and I always learn a lot from him. He's been on all the financial outlets, or rather media outlets, quote him all the time. We're very lucky to have him join us when he does. As much as he is a rich guy, and people sometimes think he's an arrogant guy, but you find me someone who is as honest and as transparent and as analytically accurate about finance and the behaviors around it, who can talk about it with the comfort level that he does, that is also just the most wonderful least arrogant person. I don't know. I love Barry. He's a good friend of mine, so I understand sometimes people's criticisms of kind of his attitude, but that's part of the game in the world that he's in to a certain extent. I always love talking to him. This was no exception. I hope you like it. Let's do it. It's great to see you. People have been clamoring. They've been asking, where's Ritholtz? And you're here to save the day.
I love a good clamor. Absolutely.
Has it been a hell of a clamor for you? And now look at you. It's December. It's the end of the year. Lots to talk about with you. We could talk about the year that passed, and we could talk about what's coming up. I mean, we generally always talk about that, but there certainly are plenty of issues to talk about. And I want to start with the prices of things. I want to start.
Well, before we talk prices,
why don't you start?
Can I just point out that it was 24 degrees in New York this morning, proving that global warming is a hoax? I mean, can we just get that out of the way?
Come on. Now you're going to force me to talk about some of the issues around that you can certainly speak to, because I always want to talk about climate and energy. And first of all, energy prices are going up overall. Is that fair to say for Americans and other energy payers across Europe and elsewhere?
What's amazing is how the rest of the world has so completely embraced sustainable and alternative energy forms. And we have finally reached the point where solar, wind, geothermal is cheaper, much cheaper than coal, cheaper than oil, and somewhat cheaper than gas. And it's just mind-blowing that we've tacked in the other direction. If you want to reduce prices, because I know you want to talk about inflation, if you want to reduce energy costs, cheap, sustainable, renewable energy is the winner. And it's just astonishing to me that Grandpa doesn't get that. They're so stuck in the 1950s. It's amazing.
He does get it. Business people get it. Capitalists get it. It's just that the oil and gas industry lobbies them otherwise. And there is this element of culture where renewable energy and battery-powered cars are for pussies. You know what I'm saying? There is a cultural idea around that it is somehow weak or cuck-like or feminine to not burn fossil fuels. And,
Well, we've all seen the big pickups with the truck nuts and the exhaust pipes that are there, like, to own the libs. 60% of the new cars sold in China last month were EVs or hybrids. That's an amazing number. And we're not instead of competing with China, we're competing with this ridiculous idealized version of the United States in the 1950s. Post-war, we were the undisputed superpower in the world. And, I love the quote from Ray Dalio, which is, and he's talking about investors, but it's true for everybody. The first job of investors is to understand reality and to deal with it. And I get the sense that a lot of policymakers either don't understand reality or just refuse to deal with it. We're trapped in somebody else's therapy session where they're just discussing denial. And it's incredibly – you want to look forwards. It's hard to look forward when the administration spends so much time looking backwards. If only it was the 1950s. If only it was the 1850s.
But to be clear, the biggest driver of that ideology, I think you agree, is the issue that we have around campaign finance and the stranglehold that the oil and gas industry in particular have on Republicans. And that's it. That's all I want to say.
The crazy thing is just what a booming business in red states that solar and wind have been. So I have a buddy who runs a farmland fund. Brandon Zick runs Saris Farmland Funds. It's a $2 billion fund, and they're based in the Midwest. It's all U.S. Investing. And part of the process of buying farmland is that farming is a really tough job. You live and die on the weather. You don't know what prices are going to be year out. It's time consuming. It's expensive. It's really tough. So what they do when they buy farmland and then lease it out to farmers, hey, how can we help you be more efficient? How can we help you make the land more productive? So there's some irrigation issues and other things, but they're very big on, hey, how do you feel about putting up a wind farm, putting up a couple of turbines that'll offset all of your electrical costs for the year? How do you feel about taking the least productive slice of your land and turning it into a solar farm? And Texas is booming with this. Texas has so much solar power, and a lot of these are just middle of the country red states. It's so fascinating how out of step the president is with his own base. It's really amazing to me. At least, and I know you want to talk about AI, that's the one forward-looking thing they seem to be embracing, albeit in a weird roundabout way.
Well, embracing it almost fully, but without regulation would seem the Republican argument, like everything else, but without regulation. I think that's a fair way of.
I would take it even further. The Washington Post just had a piece that
other countries are thinking a lot more about being responsible and trying to regulate it. I mean,
right. If Europe in particular is much savvier about individual privacy rules, and they just fined Elon Musk for fraud. Right. Those blue checks that say you're verified. If you're selling it for $8, how are you verified? So it was a $150 million fine. Or something like that. So, yeah, you have 12 billionaires in this cabinet, and you have just a collection of oligarchs with the president's ear. So, yeah, maybe it's not a technological look forward. It's more of a who has money that can support my candidates, my campaign, my this, my that.
Let me come back to AI, and let me come back to farming and I want to get to the trade war and the effect tariffs have had on our economy. I guess it's debatable, but my argument or my assertion is, and I don't know much about the economic history of this country, probably a little bit more than some, much less any other country. But let me ask you, is the trade war and this tariff nonsense the worst self-inflicted wound into the American economy ever made in terms of any leader on monetary or fiscal policy? Can you think of anything, any single thing, policy, idea, piece of legislation that damaged the economy or sectors of the economy more than the trade war that this insane man has begun? And seemingly no conservative policy thinkers, economic policy thinkers, think this is a good idea because it's anti-capitalist.
Right. So you have to go back to 1930 and the Smoot-Hartley Act that made the Depression worse by starting a trade war, putting tariffs on. I mean, if you want a policy decision that was as ruinous, I think you got to go back to Vietnam. It was a terrible policy decision that had really significant impact on the economy, not just on global relations. And then, you can make war is such a different example, but when we were attacked on 9/11 and the attack came out of Afghanistan and it was primarily Saudi Arabian nationals that perpetrated it, pivoting to attack Iraq made no sense. And that was $2 or $3 trillion in costs, lots of deaths on our side as well as the other side. But this is a pretty substantial self-own. The trade war is a solution in search of a problem. If you want to say China's a bad actor, if you want to say some of the tariffs and some of the rules and some of the restrictions on who could sell what in what country are unfair, that's fine. Go address that. But
every previous administration has done that, has said that, and if there were easy solutions for it, then Bush and Biden and Obama would have implemented them. There aren't. There's pain to go around, and it doesn't mean it's going to work. Sorry, go ahead.
No, basically it's to turn. Well, first of all, we have to preface all this by saying the executive branch, the president, doesn't have the constitutional authority to implement tariffs on his own. That was litigated. The president lost at the trial level. They lost at the first appellate level. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was extremely skeptical of the government's argument. It was pretty much a beatdown. If we had a legitimate Supreme Court, if we didn't have a bunch of hacks and partisans, this should be a 9-0 or an 8-1 decision. As is, I think it's going to be a 6-3 or a 7-2 decision, and all these tariffs will be overturned. And then the president has to either go to Congress or come up with another harebrained scheme of how to get this in. But in the meantime, this takes time. It's a year, right? So we're almost January 20th is, 40 days away, less than 40 days away. So we're almost a year into this entire process. The good news is
it takes time and it does tremendous damage.
It does a lot of damage.
That is done to many markets and many families and individuals and many businesses is real damage. And my understanding is sometimes if you lose a market, it is very hard to get market back. If you lose a client, an account, it's hard to get it back.
And here's the crazy thing. The craziest thing about the whole tariff situation is we really haven't felt the full brunt of it yet. In part because we had April 2nd, Liberation Day. What a genius bit of marketing. Yeah. And then that was paused a week later for 90 days. And in that 90 days, all these companies pulled forward all of their pre-tariff purchases. They brought in as much stuff as they possibly could. So the goods we've been buying for the better part of the past 6 months haven't really had substantial tariffs on them yet. The tariffs are there, but if you imported goods in that 90-day window from May, June, and July, right? So it's August, September, October. Hey, right around Christmas, we're starting to see some goods come in with tariffs. Do you remember what a meltdown the president had when Amazon threatened to say, here's the price and here's the tariff on it? I mean, I think
when Amazon threatened to put a note on your purchase to
every
tell,
price,
to tell you
this is $72 of which $6.50 are tariffs.
Yeah, you threaten their lives, I believe.
So the ironic thing is, the administration is insisting tariffs doesn't cause inflation, and then when the affordability hoax hurt them in the in the November elections, they want to roll back tariffs on things like coffee and
what he called the affordability hoax. You are not saying there is an affordability.
No, it's a hoax.
I know, but
inflation. I keep hearing it's a hoax. It's not real.
For you, it is.
Who are you going to believe, me or your lying
For
eyes?
you, I believe it. You rich bastard.
So,
what have you not bought as a result of the economy? Where have you held back, Ritholtz? Nothing. You probably got. You know what?
I no longer import watches from overseas because I don't want to pay a 30% VIG on top of it.
The difference between you and I is that you buy all these expensive watches because you can, and I just want the new.
I really don't. I haven't bought a watch in years.
I just want to buy, please. And I just want to buy.
I really haven't.
Okay. I just want to buy a new Apple Watch, and I'm debating it because it's so much money.
Yeah, never. I don't.
I'm the king of health over here. You're looking at.
It's got nothing to do with health. I don't want the endless notifications.
Oh, you just turn them off.
I want to be unplugged.
I don't have any notifications coming in on the watch other than your body is a temple. Don't eat that. I get that.
Or you could just be disciplined, but hold that aside.
Affordability crisis. The affordability crisis is fake, and as we saw in November, you're talking about politics. There was a real backlash to that.
But since you brought up wealth and affordability and inflation, I'll tell you what is real is the K-shaped economy. That if you're in the bottom half of the economic strata, if you're below the median household income of whatever it is, 82,000 and change, increases in prices are real because you don't have a buffer of cash sitting around that, it's going to cost that much. You go out to eat at a medium restaurant for a couple and it's over $100 and it's like, oh my God, that's kind of pricey. And you put down the credit card and out you go. If you can afford to do that, inflation is annoying. But you're not forced, if you're in the top half or the top quarter of the economic strata, you're not forced to make a difficult choice between what are we going to give up this month because so many things are more expensive. Right. And it's not inflation. People misunderstand this. Inflation is the rate of change, how fast are prices going up. If inflation dropped to zero, everything is still much more expensive than it was pre-pandemic. It doesn't matter. Cars, real estate, houses, food, energy, all these things are pricier today than they were in 2019, even if inflation slows. And we're in a 2 to 3% range, which is normal historically, but we got spoiled by the post-Great Financial Crisis era where inflation was effectively zero.
Right.
And then the pandemic happened, and then the single largest fiscal stimulus since World War II came in, and that was what lit the spark of inflation.
Hey, you mentioned the financial crisis. You wrote a book basically about it, Bailout Nation. You are a real wonk when it comes. You speak about this issue. I never stopped thinking about it because I covered it. It's where we met, where you established, I think, a lot of credibility as well. And I just want to take a quick departure because I think about this a lot. The government created an investigation called the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, the FCIC.
The book is right there on the shelf behind me.
See? I told you, folks, he's a real – and so we talked about that a lot at the time. My recollection and my understanding is the Republicans on that committee insisted that the word deregulation and deregulation not be looked at, not be used. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of things they didn't want. And then the surrogates out in the real world said, this was really caused by poor people, by black people, buying houses they couldn't afford. And it's like, well, why did banks lend money to people? You mean you didn't do a credit check? You didn't do a history check? You didn't look at their ability to service the loan? Isn't that the responsibility of banks? No. I don't mean morally. I mean legally under.
They created a complex financial scheme that they all got rich and then they ran their banks out of business. But just to stay on this thread, so the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, they refused during their investigation to consider the actual root causes of the worst financial crisis of our lifetime and maybe of all of our lifetime. And then the same thing happens.
Hopefully.
The same thing happens with climate change. When looking at climate change, Republicans insist that they don't talk that the words greenhouse gases and everything that is the root of the problem. They don't look at those. They strike those words. It is the worst kind of censorship from government to strike the words and, more importantly, the root causes of the problems that we face, whether they be financial or environmental. I feel like there's something that we really need to talk more about, how Republicans refuse to talk about the root causes of problems to the point where they strike those words from the investigations into those issues. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Two things. First, back to the financial crisis. There were three major legislative regulatory changes prior to that it's inarguable. I mean, you could try to argue, but you'll lose that those weren't significant factors that led up to the financial crisis. And by the way, it's rare that big, complicated events have a single cause. And in the book, in Bailout Nation, the centerfold here were the 7 or 9 things that all came together to cause a crisis. But on the regulatory side, first, you had the Commodities Future Modernization Act that carved out a special exemption for insurance products that were derivative-based that did not require reserve. So if you're writing life insurance, if you're writing homeowners or automobile insurance, you can use a actuarial table and say, here's how many people are going to die in any given year. We just know the math. Eventually, we have a 3% death rate in the country, which is fairly normal. So if we have 1 million policyholders, we should be prepared to pay out on 30,000 of those policies each year. And here's our reserve for that. Yeah. Same thing with automobiles and houses. When we started doing, and by the way, this was driven by, of all companies, Enron, who was making a shit ton of money on derivative writing. When the Commodities Futures Modernization Act was passed, it allowed AIG to write all of these derivative policies because they were effectively insurance policies, but with zero reserve. And AIG ended up writing $3 trillion worth of policies. So if your models are off by 1%, right, that's still $30 billion of losses you're going to have. And that's enough to bankrupt just about any financial company.
And it did. AIG went up.
And it did, right. So that's number one.
Dick Fold. Isn't that the AIG executive? Oh, that's Lehman Brothers. Sorry. Right. I thought he was the AIG executive who got punched in the face by while on a treadmill at the gym. Anyway, so stay on the target with it. You're listing the.
So the other thing was the repeal of Glass-Steagall and what Glass-Steagall had done. So this didn't cause the crisis, but it let it get much bigger. Glass-Steagall used to say, hey, our FDIC banks are over here, our speculative Wall Street banks are over there, and never the twain shall meet. The repeal of Glass-Steagall, which kind of happened in the sort of extra legal way before the legislation was passed, I think it was the Graham Leach-Biley Act.
Blithely,
repealed Glass-Steagall.
Yep.
And so basically it allowed banks like Citibank and Wells Fargo and Wachovia and go down the list and how many banks
and that was
blew up, Washington Mutual.
And that was
it allowed them to speculate and essentially turn into giant hedge fund casinos. And so when everybody else was getting rich in the early 2000s speculating on housing, they jumped in. And that's why the FDIC reserve fund ran all the way down. And that's why so many of these banks had to be rescued, and both banks and brokers.
Always worth mentioning here that it was Clinton who was the Democratic president, with a very conservative capitalist Treasury Secretary named Robert Rubin. And when they passed that...
You're forgetting one other person, the person who replaced Rubin, one recently banned for life, Larry Summers.
Right. Treasury Secretary.
The American Economic Association banned him for life. Because of his role with Jeffrey Epstein.
They should have banned him for life because of his role in advisement as Treasury Secretary for both Clinton and later on Obama, I believe. But so it's worth mentioning that when they repealed Glass-Steagall and that whatever it was called act,
Rubin,
Byron Dorgan, senator from South Dakota, stood on the Senate floor and he said, this is going to come back in about 10 years or so. You can find the New York Times article of them quoting him. And it's exactly what happened. You're very good in your most recent piece over the big picture to look back at you and other analysts who said, if we do this, this is going to happen. That's where people get their credibility. And I think that really matters in today's media environment, which is why I'm belaboring these points and trying to make sure everybody understands yours and to some extent mine for having you here. But it's important that Byron Dorgan and others like Robert Reich predicted this would happen as a result of getting rid of Glass-Steagall, and it did. So you haven't gotten to the third cause, I don't think.
Well, by the way, Rubin, after repealing Glass-Steagall, which allowed the Travelers Citibank merger to take place, later becomes chairman of Citibank, which you would think would violate every ethic and conflict rule there is, and yet somehow that managed to happen. I don't remember where I was going with the third one. I got derailed with Citibank. But the third one, Chairman Alan Greenspan, as head of the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve is responsible for all manner of bank regulation. And there was a run of these non-bank lenders that were cranking out these, 228 interest only, no background check, liar loans. And Greenspan said, we don't need to regulate these or oversee these. The market will take care of it. And he was technically correct. All those banks went out of business. All those non-banks went out of business. But, we had 3 million foreclosures and $1 trillion rescue. So, the market eventually cleaned it up. So one was a repeal of legislation, one was new legislation, and the third was repeal of regulation, new deregulation, and the third was refusal to regulate, even though they had the authority and the responsibility. So those three factors were giant. There were a lot of other factors: 0% interest rate,
credit agency corruption.
Right. I mean, it was endless. Like if I were to rewrite that book, I'd probably have another dozen blamees for who's responsible. We really didn't know at the time how significant MERS was. That's the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, which is another technically extra legal, no legislation that authorized them to run normally you get a mortgage and it gets filed in the local town. But when you're securitizing these, when you're slicing them and dicing them, no one can keep up with it. So let's set up an electronic system to track this. P.S. That system did a horrible job. And that's how you ended up with people with no mortgages getting foreclosed on. Right. Like that's how screwed up that became.
I want to talk about it forever. It's important that people understand that history right there because there are a whole bunch of people who are rewriting history, constantly creating conspiracies. And a lot of that stuff, I think, most importantly, it destroys the credibility of people who have it, and it gives credibility to people who don't have it, like Peter, what's his name, Schweitzer, and all these other kind of libertarian weird free market gold buggeries that want to get rid of the Fed.
By the way, but let me just interrupt you a second. It's ironic that the president wants to take a piece of Intel and wants to take a piece of all these companies, and his party colleagues are going along with it. Right. My suggestion during the financial crisis was, if we're going to bail out these companies that are otherwise a zero, let's have the taxpayer take 30, 40% of these companies. And when we put them through bankruptcy, fix them up, and then bring them public again, the public will be made whole for their multi-trillion-dollar bailout. That's the time to do it. Hey, here's the deal. We own half of you. Alternatively, you're a zero. How do you feel about that? That should have been done, and it wasn't done then.
So socializing the risk and privatizing the profits is what happens so often in this country, right? When these industries or individual companies commit these types of fraudulent practices, let's just say, that screw over a whole bunch of people. But just coming back, thinking about the bailouts and thinking about how much money government approved to bail out these banks or to save, for example, General Motors, I think it's fair to look at those as investments into the future of the financial system or the future of the automobile industry, which a lot of people will say is a pretty necessary thing to have for a successful, rich country, an automobile industry. But compare and contrast that to $12 billion in bailouts to farmers. That's not an investment. I guess it keeps the farmer from blowing his head off and keeps his farm there for next year, but the food rotted. It didn't get sold. That seems like an easier thing for people to understand. Compare and contrast the farm bailouts that were needed because of a self-inflicted wound of a trade war that this stupid fucking uncle scam started to the bailouts of the past.
So we're putting tariffs on imports. So naturally other countries reciprocate. China in particular is a giant buyer, at least was, of our soybeans. And then we're putting tariffs on companies like GM and Ford and Caterpillar and John Deere and making it more challenging for them. By the way, all those companies' stocks, which all our clients own as part of the S&P 500, they've all done really well since that Supreme Court decision, because the assumption is once this Supreme Court hearing, we're waiting for the decision. The assumption was once these companies have the tariffs off their back, their sales will do much better. And P.S., companies like Costco and others have sued the government.
Yeah, what's that?
Because they're entitled to a refund.
Am I going to get money? I'm a Costco member in good standing. I'm going to get money back.
Costco will get the refund. You as a consumer.
I think they're going to pass it along to me in a form of lined pants and a huge crate of potatoes.
Or lower prices, arguably. But you're seeing lots of companies do this. It's kind of fascinating that a bunch of companies were kind of chicken shit about doing this. They were afraid to do it because they're all terrified of the president's wrath. Costco was kind of like, yeah, we're bigger than you. Yeah. You come after us. We don't give a shit.
That's why I'm a member.
They happen to be, by the way, the Costco story, if you ever go out and read it, it's an unbelievable story how that company even came to exist. It's really fascinating. Talk about history. But since we're talking about tariffs and we're talking about where we are today,
and bailouts,
$12 billion to the farmer. I am always look, my whole career is spent focused on human decision making and where it goes awry. That was the whole second book, quick plug, How Not to Invest. Really, the focus is, why do people make bad decisions? What leads us? What is in our DNA that leads us to not do well, either in stocks or in our personal life or in politics or in consumption? We make a whole lot of really bad decisions. I'm astonished that the farmers, and I really shouldn't be, we went through this in the first Trump
won.
term, and there were all sorts of complaints. There was a bailout of farmers for that back then. Yep. There were complaints that markets were lost permanently. Yep. And then when Trump 2 comes along, they were like, yeah, give me some more of that. So I don't think we should bail out the farmers.
I said that last night at our hangout.
I'm a fan of farmers.
Me too. I grew up on them.
Into farmland.
Yes.
But I think that at a certain point, you have to take responsibility. You have to own your own bad decisions. And if that means that you're going to run at a loss for a couple of years, maybe be more intelligent. Don't vote against your own interest. By the way, that's the genius of American politics, is how many people are convinced to vote against their own interest. And we're now seeing this with the Obamacare extensions,
with healthcare,
and which is going to hurt the red states.
Oh, it's going to kill and so many people on Medicaid and so many people on independent contractors and entrepreneurs on the exchanges as well. But I would just take it a little further than, I don't feel bad for the farmers who voted for the.
No, I feel bad for them, and I want them to make better decisions.
I'm saying I would take it further in that if you made a bad decision with your vote, I will forgive you if you right now stand up, walk out to a microphone, join in other farmers and say, I was wrong to vote for this man, or at least say this policy has destroyed. I feel like they're not loud enough. I feel like the few farmers who will speak out are so overbooked on MSNBC. Like they all need to join together and speak out. Whether or not they voted for him or against him, I would like to hear from more of them, and I feel like I'm not. So moving on, there's two other things.
It's called MS Now.
Forgive me.
It's no longer MS.
Forgive me. MS Now.
Yeah.
MS, I can't believe he hasn't come up with a terrible name for that. MS Cow, if you're listening to. Okay, I want to talk to you about AI. I want to talk to you about inflation. First, AI. There has been this theory that there was an AI bubble, and a lot of concern with investors and others about that. Recently, there seems to have been something that's changed that's caused a little more calmness around the AI bubble, but still a lot of smart people are talking about comparing it to the dot-com bubble of the late 90s, and that, yes, it hasn't happened, but it will happen. It's just a little further down the road. Seemingly, markets have reacted and seem comfortable. What is going on? AI bubble time.
So first, Time Magazine Man of the Year is the people behind AI. Historically, by the time it makes it to the cover of Time, the run is over. And famously, December 99, they put Jeff Bezos on the cover. About 10, and that was right before a 88% crash in the stock. They did something similar with Mark Zuckerberg a decade later. At the time, Facebook was widely liked. And now he's become a pariah and as thought of as like an evil oligarch. So the Time Magazine cover curse is still alive and well. And go back to, I want to say 06 or 07. I'm not sure if it was Time or Newsweek. Why we love houses right before that crash. I'm not fully in the bubble camp. I'm in the boom and bust camp, which is a little more. You want to look at a bubble, look at NFTs. Do you remember 5 years ago? NFTs, one sold for the Beeple collection sold for $69 million. I forgot the name of the other one, sold for $90 million. And then there's a
NFT stands for non-fungible token, a unique digital certificate.
Bored Ape Yacht Club and a whole bunch of wacky stuff. $50 billion worth of those tokens were purchased. Today, they're worth 1% of that. That's a true bubble. Here's something that very akin to the Dutch tulip bubble from centuries ago. Here's something of arguably zero intrinsic value that's run up to crazy prices and then came crashing back down. So let's compare AI to the internet. And if you remember back in the day, there were all these quote unquote internet companies, and there were Pets.com and Juniper Networks and Metro Media Fiber and all these other companies. And starting in around March 2000, all of these companies crashed. Many went out of business. A lot of them fell 70, 80, 90%. That was pretty much a full-on bubble. Once we stopped caring about revenues and profits and started caring about clicks and eyeballs, like we became untethered from why people put money into the stock market. And that was a legitimate complaint. Wait, they have no revenues. It's a wisp of an idea and it's going public. And that happened a lot. P.S. You can make an argument that, hey, Pets.com was way ahead of its time, and now Chewy is the modern version of that. It's very successful. I believe it's profitable. It's a fast growing online pet goods supply stuff. So some of the stuff was just ahead of its time. Fast forward to now, and we're looking at AI, and you have lots and lots of companies booking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So it's NVIDIA and it's Amazon Web Services, and it's Microsoft, and it's go down the list of companies that are in this space. Some people use the phrase hyperscalers. I can't tell you which of these companies are going to be the winner, but I can tell you that at a certain point in the future, there will be a clear delineation of the early companies who were winners and who were losers. Now, roll back a quarter century to the internet and the .com.
Yeah.
We don't mention internet companies anymore because every company is an internet company. We all use email. We all have a website. We all use Slack or Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is, or Zoom. The internet is a key part of what every business does. And I don't think there's much argument that it doesn't make us more productive, more efficient, more profitable. And so the question of is AI a bubble is almost the wrong question. The right question is,
when will?
Forget the Magnificent Seven. Look at the rest of the 493 in the S&P 500. Will the deployment of artificial intelligence make those companies more efficient, more productive, more profitable? And the chief economist at Vanguard, a guy named Joe Davis, wrote a white paper back in 2019, which is now a book, just came out this year, that basically looks at 100 years of technological innovation. And they found that technological innovation takes place in two phases. The first phase are the companies that are the pick and shovel companies, the actual builders of the underlying infrastructure. And there's a boom and bust in that. Think back to every new tech company. How many computer companies were there?
Right.
Gateway and Compu, whatever. And there were hundreds of them, and now you're down to 3 or 4 companies left. And the same thing happened with, radio and TV and automobiles, and go down the list. Every major industrial or technological innovation leads to a land rush, and then eventually there's the fallout.
Data centers.
Right. So now we don't know who the big one. Maybe it's NVIDIA. Maybe it's AMD. Maybe it's Intel. Maybe it's Qualcomm. Maybe it's Oracle. I could give you a list of 30 companies, and I have no idea which one of them are winners or losers. Arguably, NVIDIA is – or not really arguably. NVIDIA is clearly the front runner today, but go back and look at all these other industries. Very often the front runner falters. They get locked into wherever they are. And some kid who's in high school today, 8 years from now, when he graduates Stanford and launches his or her new company, they're going to be able to do what NVIDIA does for 1/100th of the price, twice the efficiency, and now all of a sudden, robots everywhere, intelligent robots everywhere. So, it's really tough to guess who the winners are today. But the second phase, as we saw with the internet, is when everybody adopts this. By the way, this isn't all sunshine and roses. There are positives and negatives. If you look at the unemployment rate for under 30 years old, it's double the national unemployment rate. So there's a clear sense that artificial intelligence is replacing entry-level workers, especially white-collar workers. And the question is, how do you become a mid-level worker if you're not hired or trained as an entry-level worker? So there's definitely some downside here, but the expectation is this is going to have a net positive impact on corporate America, for better or worse.
Great explanation. Finally, I want to get to this piece that you have over at Ritholtz.com, the Big Picture blog, where you continue to post your brilliant observations, analysis, insights, and hyperlinks. It's titled, Whose Inflation Is This? An attempt to explain responsibility. And you do a little bit of a deep dive into where this started. You go back to the pandemic. You also reference a conversation you had with someone that you brought on your platform. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Professor Jeremy Siegel basically predicted a lot of this back in May 2020 with you. And why are you bringing this up now? You say because this whole question of affordability is not a hoax, as Uncle Scam said. Take it from there. What do you want to tell us?
Sure. So first of all, the president during the pandemic in 2020 was presented with a terrible choice between a rock and a hard place. And that choice is essentially,
as was every other world leader.
That's right.
Because
do we do nothing and let unemployment run up to 10, 12, 15%? Or do we do a giant fiscal stimulus and run the risk that inflation runs up to 9, 11, 14%, wherever the choices are? And listen, nobody likes higher prices, but you at least can navigate through it. If you're unemployed, it's a disaster. You have to worry about how you're going to pay the rent, how you're going to put food on the table, how you're going to get your kids, because we get all our health care through our work in this country. If my kid needs a surgery, what happens here? And so unemployment is a much worse option. And I think everybody pretty much agrees with that. So to this president's credit, in 2020, they passed the single largest fiscal stimulus as a percentage of GDP since World War II. And that prevented unemployment from being, as it turned out, by the way, John Maynard Keynes, who talked about fiscal stimulus a century earlier, again, time and again, he's proven right. When there is a substantial downturn in the economy, the government should temporarily step in and replace the demand that used to come from households and businesses with some fiscal stimulus. I mean, it's just the playbook. We did not do that after the financial crisis. I think that was purposeful and was trying to submarine Obama, but that's just my
you think?
opinion.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I said that to a bunch of people, including
everybody knew that. I mean, glad that you said it.
No, when I said that in 2010 and 11 to a bunch of people, including a Nobel laureate at the table, no, congressmen and senators are terrible, but even they wouldn't do that. There was a general consensus. Gee, that's you're not a conspiracy theory. That sounds a little conspiratorial. I'm like, it's not a secret. Here's what they've done in the past, and here's what they're doing now. They are failing to step up with an appropriate fiscal stimulus, and the results were a long, slow recovery, subpar recovery in terms of job creation, wage gains, consumer spending, primarily due to a lack of a fiscal stimulus. Fast forward to March 2020, massive fiscal stimulus, and what happens? The most robust recovery in the world. Everybody else was lagging us. A giant inflationary surge, which, look, Professor Jeremy Siegel of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania is a highly regarded expert on markets and the economy. He wrote the book Stocks for the Long Run, which is, I don't know, it's like 8th print edition, and highly, highly regarded professor said, I'll give you the quote. First, we're going to have this is May 2020. We're going to have a huge spending boom next year, and I think for the first time, and I know this is a sharp minority view here, for the first time in over 2 decades, we're going to see inflation. And people were shocked at that. So I pressed him on it. And the answer was, with this liquidity in the economy, I expect moderate inflation. I'm not talking about hyperinflation. I'm nowhere near that. I expect inflation to run up next year or two to 2, 3, 4, 5%, and maybe run again in 2022 the same way. So cumulatively, I expect inflation to go up 10, 12% over the next few years. That is exactly what happened. And what's astonishing is how nobody holds this president accountable for his role in it. And I wrote a piece a year or two later, Causes of Inflation 1 to 15. And I blame the pandemic, obviously, and Congress and Biden and Trump and greedflation and the consumer and all these other factors that drove inflation. But I'm amazed that this president has skated away from any responsibility for the giant inflation surge we saw pretty much starting in late 2020 and right through 21 and 22. He left a ticking time bomb for Biden with this. And again, an intelligent observer saw this in May, 2 months after the first CARES Act was passed. Then the second CARES Act was passed by Trump. Then the third CARES Act was passed by Biden. I don't exonerate Biden. I find him responsible also. And by the way, the choice to say I would rather have high inflation over high unemployment because high inflation is temporary and high unemployment leaves a permanent mark and has a giant impact on the economy, that was the least bad choice. You had two bad options. That was the less bad option. So it's not like, oh, he made a terrible mistake. He made a difficult choice, and I think he made the right choice. What I'm kind of flummoxed by is how nobody has said this affordability hoax is in large part traces back to the correct choice you made in 2020, but please understand your role in it. This isn't a hoax, it's real, and you're one of the factors that drove it.
That's such a very important point to remind people about. I'm so glad I'll share that post. Everybody should go read that post at The Big Picture. But I do think, I agree with you that he skated away from it so far. But I think that his time is coming. Retribution on this issue. When Americans just don't see things going down, they're always going to blame the people in office, and that does break the fever to a certain extent of the cult you're seeing.
Worse than blaming people in office, when you say, I'll bring prices down day one, it's easy. I'll end the war in Ukraine day one, it's easy.
Right. And
all the promises that were made,
even if you say, well, the thing is, what's fascinating is the audacity of this man and the people that support him in right-wing media especially, that he just says a thing happened that didn't happen. Prices are the lowest, the economy is the best, and I solved the wars. You're like, I don't think that your grandmother didn't die. No, she's dead. Grandma died. She didn't not die. She's dead. What are you talking about? How are you convincing me that she's back? No, she's doing good. She's just at the house. No, I'm pretty sure she's dead. No, she's alive. Why are you lying?
I'm a big fan of the quote, I can't hear what you're saying because what you do speaks so loudly. And so when you look at whether – I don't pay close attention to approval polls because we know polling has been so flawed. But we do see what the election results were. We do see – look, Miami hasn't had a Democratic mayor in 30 years.
They just elected a Democratic socialist.
As did New York City. New York City always elects
Seattle.
Democrats, but a Democratic socialist who, by the way, I don't really understand this bromance between him and Trump.
I do.
Mondami and Trump, but
get it.
Hey, if it keeps the federal tax dollars flowing to New York, I'm okay with it.
The issue is very simple, and sometimes you're too smart, but I'm not. And I see these things where sometimes other people don't because I'm
Two guys from Queens.
No, it's simply, and this is true, Donald Trump has always liked and been impressed with popular people, and he gravitates towards them. So it's like sometimes people will say he's not racist because he was friends with Don King. No, he was friends with Don King because of who Don King was, as a piece of shit, by the way. And the same is true of all of these other famous people that he's
killed a man, didn't he?
He's not a good guy. But he screwed over Mike Tyson. But the bottom line is he gravitates towards anybody who's hot right now. And Mamdani was very hot and very likable and very charming, and that's all you need to know. That's why.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. But a lot of this just comes back.
And he wants to steal. He wants to get some of that secret sauce. What's that guy doing? I got affordability. That's working. I'll try that. Now he's saying it's a scam word.
He used affordability.
It didn't work for him. It worked for him for like a day and a half. He stopped using it.
No, he used it to get elected. He constantly
never used the word. He never used that word.
He didn't say the word affordability, but he talked about high prices and he talked about inflation.
About eggs and pencils. Did you hear him say at a rally? He said, maybe you're not going to be able to get 2 pencils. Do you know how fucking unbelievably idiotic like that? That's the weirdest. You could say anything. You could talk about anything.
You don't need $27. You just need $2 or $3.
But think about it for 1 second. Who is budgeting? People are budgeting on toys, if you want to call them dolls. People do say, "Can I afford these toys for my kids this year?" But nobody says, "Can I get these pencils?" Nobody's using pencils.
I was going to say, who uses pencils?
Some people, but even you could be the poorest artist or writer in the world, and you could find pencils. You could find them somewhere.
They're free. You walk into various stores. They're right there in a cup.
You'd be ridiculed for using it. What are you doing? What are you using a pencil for? What are you using, a Scantron test?
Every time I have to sign my name on a piece of paper, like I sign my name and I'm like, God, I can't remember the last time I picked up a pen. And look how terrible my handwriting is. I just don't. Who does that?
If people can't afford a couple of quills And inkwells.
But can I tell you, you're pointing to something really important, which is why has over the past decade or two, this country become ruled by geriatrics? And listen, my dotage is not too far off in the future. I can see when I'm going to be just lying at home and drooling. Like, that's not that far off. But I don't understand why we keep electing 80-year-olds.
You know why?
Why?
Moving on.
I think at a certain point, the country has to say, and I don't care it's left or right. It could be Pelosi and Schumer and all the people on the right who are crypt keepers, but there's just no reason. And people are saying, oh, Mondami is so young. Yeah, I'd rather have somebody thinking about the future than somebody who's burial plots.
Always. So if you really care, if you really want to be kind of look at people's self-interest, young people care about the future a lot more than old people. All right, last thing I want to ask you, if you get time, is does anybody in your world look at, or I guess in economics and immigration, the economic effect? I talk a lot about the human rights and obviously horribly morally corrupt acts of deporting people. The way they are and snatch industry, but the economic impact. I know there is already an economic impact of what this means for all of the industries and all of the places. I remember when I interviewed Anthony Bourdain years ago, and he said, and I remember because the clip kind of went viral. He's like, if you deported every person working in a restaurant in New York City, you'd have no restaurants open. And I'm wondering about the economic effect of these immigration crackdowns, because whether or not they're being deported, there's a chilling effect on undocumented people going to work at their landscaping job, at their restaurant job, etc. What are your how much do you pay attention to the economic effect of these primitive immigration deportations, this medieval craziness?
So first off, I do a quarterly call for clients, and I always save one slide for the end, which is just something to think about. And what's fascinating, and this is according to a conservative right-wing group, the American Enterprise Institute.
AEI, yeah.
2025 is going to be the first time ever that the U.S. in its history will see a population decrease. Their forecast is down about 500,000. There's a handful of other people that have done these sort of forecasts. There's a CBO projection that has us more or less at a flat this year. But when you look at the history of America, this has never happened before. And so it's been pretty it's an element. So when you look at all the jobs that are hard to fill, when you look at AI stepping into a lot of white-collar jobs, a big part of this is because there simply aren't enough bodies there. And these aren't foreigners taking jobs that Americans want. These are the least desirable entry-level jobs in restaurants, on farms, in nursing. By the way, if we stop immigration as the oldest generation continues to age out, there's not going to be enough healthcare workers to take care of these folks. Most of those people are coming primarily legally from overseas and from lots of the Caribbean and South America. And, to stop that is really cutting off our nose to spite our face. It's astonishing. It would be one thing if there were lots of Americans clamoring for these jobs and saying, hey, we can't compete with these people who take lower wages. That's not what the economic situation. The economic situation is either you hire an immigrant for this job or that position goes unfilled.
I would just like to wrap it all up by naming, I think, 4 net effects that this administration has done that will hurt the economy, working our way backward. Immigration, tariff and trade war. I think also the lack of investment into renewable energy and building factories and building the future of energy and technology. Those are 3 things. But also, and finally, and maybe more importantly, the fact that people's health care prices, they're always going to go up, by the way. I think we should, because we're not fixing the system.
But it's been 9% a year for forever. That's way above inflation.
And now it's going to, in some people's premiums are going to double. The net effect of those four policies, either what they did or did not do about trying to fix it, I don't know how it doesn't end up in a pretty bad 26, 27, I don't know.
So the fascinating thing is, I heard the president say he inherited a mess from the Biden administration. He inherited an economy that was so robust that all of these self-inflicted wounds have not yet caused a recession. That's how strong the economy was that he inherited, that it could take all these body blows and it's still moving along. At a certain point, all these little injuries, all these little wounds, you just start to bleed out and eventually the economy is going to stumble. That's the nature of this. You can't just persistently damage the way the economy works. You can't hurt the consumer. You can't hurt manufacturers. You can't hurt retailers and farmers without eventually the economy taking a hit. And I don't see a recession in the next quarter, probably not even the first half of the year. And it's an election year. So historically, presidents have a tendency to try and get as much stimulus into the economy because it's still the economy, stupid. People still vote on the economy. But one very possible scenario is that by the end of the summer, or maybe sooner, we're in a modest downturn, not a full-on disaster, just we go from +2, +3% growth to -1% growth. And that has significant ramifications for the November elections. We know if the elections were held today, this would be a 20, 25, 30 seat swing in the House, even with all the redistricting nonsense. It's to see a close battle in Tennessee, to see a Democratic victory in a city like Miami that has been anti-Democrat for 30, 40 years, really is telling you that a lot of the population didn't vote for this. They wanted, hey, we want to end the wars and we want to see prices come down. And it was a bait and switch. We got something completely different. I'm not a fan of letting people walk away from their responsibility when they make a decision. I think you need to hold people accountable. And I think you're starting to see the electorate say, ho, 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 you ran on high prices and bringing them down. What is all this craziness?
Really appreciate all that. Last question. I got one more. I just thought of it, which is about interest rates and the Fed and their recent moves. And more importantly, how much are people in your world looking at the fact that he is going to get rid of Jerome Powell and potentially replace him with Ebenezer Scrooge or a bag of gold coins that are actually just chocolate?
So Jerome Powell's term ends in the spring, and that's all that's expected. He hasn't announced whether, once he steps down as chairman, whether he's going to stay as a Fed governor. But I think the takeaway is there is a reason why we have an independent Fed. And the reason is if you left it to the president, they would give you 0% interest rate. Everybody would go have a big party, and then you'd have another uncontrollable surge of inflation. So this is why we want the Federal Reserve to be independent. We want the Department of Justice to be independent. We want the FTC to be independent. We want the CDC to be independent. And I think the big takeaway from this White House is we have a system that's literally distributed power, a series of checks and balances. We don't want all this power in one person's hands because, as we've seen, they make decisions that help for the moment, but then kind of leave a ticking time bomb. We haven't talked about, Biden got the blame for that disastrous Afghanistan pullout. There's a fair argument to be made. His hands were tied, and that was a little present left for him,
right? Yeah.
By the previous president.
It was negotiated it. Yes,
it was Trump's timeline
with the Taliban. He fucking invited the Taliban to Camp David. If Obama or Biden had done that, they would have gone absolutely nuts having them in America.
To be fair, Obama did once wear a beige suit in the Oval Office, and
he once said that a cop behaved poorly.
That's true. So it's even Steven. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. So. Interest rates are going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine.
The best thing about the U.S. economy is it's somewhat self-correcting, and when we have these giant mistakes, it eventually flushes itself out. The only question is how much damage gets done between now and then.
Right,
and that's a big question. Yeah. That's a real question.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep talking about it to get the answers. Barry Ritholtz, always a pleasure. Thank you for spending a full hour with us today.
My pleasure.
Everybody will go buy your book. Everybody should go buy your book.
How Not to Invest. It's out there. It got some really good reviews on Amazon. I'm really pleased with how it's been doing. So it's been fun talking about it because I love to talk about human decision making and why we're not great at it.
You know, the best review is from my father. My dad said it's one of the best books he's ever read on finance.
Really?
Yeah, he says it's actually a better review. I should have him write it down, but he basically is like, if everybody would just read this book, it would be a lot easier for any investor because these rules have always been pretty consistent, and Barry's just reminding us of them and what we've learned. It's not, particularly hard to figure out, yet no one seemed to be able to do it the way you did it in the book.
So since this is the end of a podcast and nobody will hear it, I'll confess to a murder right here. The book really isn't about investing. It's
How
really
not to
about,
invest? Well,
it's really not about finance or money. It's about decision making, and it doesn't matter what field it is. You have to be more thoughtful and circumspect about who you listen to, what you read.
Will it help
will
how to invest? Will how not to invest your book? Will it help your marriage? What about your personal health?
If you make better, more thoughtful decisions, sure.
And your personal health, will it affect your physical health?
Again, are you going to go to McDonald's or are you going to have something healthy? It's about good decision making no matter what the subject is.
Are you eating enough protein?
Up until Thanksgiving, almost only protein. And now I've been on a holiday jag of junk food and garbage. A friend of mine has a chart showing everybody's weight over the course of the year. Thanksgiving to New Year's is where America puts on the most amount of weight throughout the year.
As a result of knowing that, I've picked this time to be on my best behavior. And
really?
And I've only been invited to one holiday party, so I'm not too worried about it. You probably get invited to a lot of holiday parties. How many? I think that, by the way, I think you should evaluate your net worth, your personal net worth, on how many holiday parties you at least get invited to. Not how many you go. I'm not saying you have to go.
I don't really go to many of those.
How many did you get invited to?
I don't know. I say no to most of them, so I don't pay
several
attention.
Though, but several you would say.
More than one, yes.
No. So two.
A bunch. I mean, most of those, by the way, most business holiday parties are business. It's not fun. And I don't need to stand around in the dark with bad music playing, drinking warm beer while someone sells me on a shitty mutual fund. I could skip that.
I think I've told you I'm in a relationship with a man in Australia. Have I told you that?
No. You got catfished?
No, we've been friends forever and we talk every day. We're codependent.
Get out, really?
Yeah. Yes, he's pretty much my best friend, and for a lot of anyway, he was.
When was the last time you have you ever physically met him?
Yeah, of course. We hung out, and when he lived in New York, that's how we met in the when we were in our early 20s.
And when did he move to Australia?
He moved back to Australia because he's Australian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I saw him 2 summers ago. I went down there, but he just told me yesterday that they basically shut down for a month. Because it's their summer now,
right.
and so they get but they everybody pretty much stops working this week until the end of January or something.
So it's like Europe in August.
Yeah, but I didn't know that about
the entire continent is closed. And I will tell you, I have noticed over the past decade or two that has started to take place in the U.S. more and more.
Yeah,
it used to be summer Fridays where a lot of people were closed. And then by the time you get to August, it's just a lot of, hey, I'll check in on Tuesday.
Right.
But
I think it does happen a lot in August, but it's interesting to point out, I suppose, in the Southern Hemisphere or in Australia, this is their summer. And so they take off. It's just also a really interesting, good time to take off because it's the holidays.
Right.
For us, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, what gets done, either a lot, depending on your industry, or not a lot, I suppose.
So we were in Miami last week.
Cram it all in.
We were in Miami last week, and what's always funny is Christmas in a warm region where you see the lights on a palm tree. It just looks so wrong. Santa is from the North Pole, not from Miami Beach. And so it's always weird and odd seeing that. It's also from the airport to the beach. I turn to my wife and I go, It's a shame all of this is going to be underwater in a few decades. It's like you're looking around and it's like, Jesus, everything is at sea level. Like they're talking about a $35 billion plan to raise the shoreline of New York City 25 feet. That's what they're doing in New York.
You need a seawall.
And in Florida, it's like, no, we're all good.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Last question. I said that 4 times. Do you feel, I've been asking all my non-Christian, non-Christmas people, my understanding is that you're Jewish or raised Jewish. Do you feel like you missed out on Christmas morning and the feeling that a child gets seeing all those presents, if they're lucky enough to be privileged and their parents get them a bunch of presents? Do you feel like you missed out? Did you when you were growing up? Did you feel
when I was younger, for sure?
As
a kid, it's like I can't. And Hanukkah with 8 crazy nights of shitty little presents doesn't compare.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that once you're out of your 20s, that you completely fades because
it fades, but I'm saying I still compare levels of excitement to Christmas morning in my life. And I don't know what you have like that from your childhood.
So when I'm married 100 years now, when my wife first moved into my apartment in the city, the only piece of furniture she brought was this big glass dining room table. And heading into Hanukkah, back then we were young, we were broke, we didn't have a lot of money. We started putting little gift wrapped presents on the table.
There you go.
Not like a tree, but so all of this pile of presents started to grow, and
they all built into a crucifix.
What happened is, as we got closer to Hanukkah, it's like, and the Jews use a lunar calendar, so it's not like December 25th every year. Some years Hanukkah is like November, some years December. It's all over the place. Hey, do we really want to open these presents? It's not even Thanksgiving yet.
Right.
So we rolled, let's wait till the end of Hanukkah. And then the end of Hanukkah, it's like, well, let's wait till Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, it was like, gee, everybody gets to have a religion. And I joke about friends, Jews in Connecticut who celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
You get any religion in the world, pick one.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be Jewish, great. If you want to celebrate Christmas, great. But Jewish Christmas trees are a non-starter for me.
Oh, that bothers you.
So when we were trying to scratch our head and figure out what to do, I think it was me who came up with the idea. Hey, why don't we open our presents on New Year's Eve? And we've been doing that since we've been engaged. Oh. And so our big
celebration
is so New Year's. This. New Year's Eve is amateur night. Like I don't need to go to a party or pay double to go to a restaurant with a bunch of strangers. So we go to an early dinner. We're home, pop a bottle of champagne, and open our presents. And that's my New Year's Eve. That's my Christmas Day.
Do you celebrate Christ's birth at some point? Does someone say something about the Lord?
No, nobody talks about that. Oh. It's usually the conversation is, ooh, how did you know I wanted that? Or, oh, I bought this for myself 3 months ago and didn't tell you about it because it was expensive, sort of shit. So there was that. And there's always, I ordered this in September and I just got an email. It won't be here.
How many of the presents your wife gets were bought for you by you? And then you're like, I don't want this. And then you wrap it up.
Zero. No, listen. I know what she likes. I know what the
another man's watch.
Not a man's watch, a woman's watch. Last year,
why do you keep getting me?
I got her a 1950 Rolex, this tiny little Rolex that I hunted down in Japan. It was shockingly reasonable.
So
I mean, like
you said you haven't bought a watch.
$1,000, not like a crazy watch.
In years earlier, but you just bought a watch a year ago. You did. You said you hadn't. You said you haven't bought a watch in years.
When was the last watch I got?
Jesus.
The last watch I got was
this guy.
Oh no, I didn't buy any watches in 2025.
Oh, honey, a wallet with the initials BR embroidered. I think you might have got this for you.
So here's the thing about watches, and this will be the last thing I'll say.
I'm going to just end it.
No, nobody needs a mechanical watch. It's absolutely a holy.
Yeah, it doesn't
just as nobody needs a V8 with a stick shift. Nobody needs that. But the reason you do things like that is you appreciate the craftsmanship and you appreciate the throwback to a different era. Like, we all have one of these. I don't need a goddamn Apple Watch on my wrist. I don't want to see my emails. I don't want to see notifications.
You need to reach your standing goal and things like that. And also, you guys just got a coal-fired bread oven, I believe, right? Because speaking of throwbacks, a coal-fired bread.
No, it's an Uni pizza oven, and that's 3 years old.
Forgive me. I thought you got a coal.
And it works off of gas. It's actually relatively
clean. To a coal delivery service, is my
That's right. With the milkman leaves the milk, and the guy fills up the coal box, so we can throw it into the furnace.
Barry Ritholtz.
We have black soot coming out of the roof of the house.
Soot. Ritholtz, everybody. Go check out The Big Picture. Get the book, How Not to Invest Right Now. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for everybody joining us live. And go subscribe. Bye-bye. All right, that's all I've got for you. There you go, everybody. That's the Monday show. I should be live later on around 4:30 with Anya Kamenetz. And only you bumblebees here at the end got that tip because I forgot to mention it at the top. So if you want to tune into that, that should be at around 4:30 East today, Monday, the 15th of December. I hope your Monday is okay. I hope you're finding the helpers, finding the light, spreading the light wherever you can. I am so grateful to have you here with me, spreading it, putting it on me. Thank you so much for your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You can always pledge more than you already are if you want. Some of you have. Great time of year to do that. Certainly, obviously, I really appreciate it, whatever you can do. That's it. That's all. I will talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll taking us in and out as he always does. JohnCarroll.org. Support him. I'll talk to you later.
So long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.